Hello everyone, welcome to the next episode of SpongeBob Now. Today, I will be talking about born-again crabs, and I had an accident. First, I'm going to talk about born-again crabs. Enjoy. One day, it is closing time at the Krusty Krab, and Squidward is obviously delighted at being free of work, while a sad SpongeBob is not. He soon finds an old, blackened, moldy Krabby Patty under the grill, and he tries to throw it out. However, this triggers an alarm, and Mr. Krabs will not let him throw out the patty, as serving it will give him 5.2 cents, and he orders SpongeBob not to make another patty until that one is sold. The next day, Squidward is informed of the decision, and reluctantly holds out the rancid patty to the customer. The customer takes one sniff of the moldy patty, screams in utter horror, and backflips out the door in disgust. Sure enough, this results in the Krusty Krab losing many weeks' worth of business. Mr. Krabs wonders if it is the new placemats, but Squidward angrily tells his boss it is the old rotten patty he keeps trying to serve to everyone. The stubborn Mr. Krabs dismisses such a notion and has SpongeBob bring it out. SpongeBob reveals that he has caged it since it became sentient enough to growl at him like an animal. Mr. Krabs decides to prove his views by eating the patty, though before he eats it he sees an ambulance passing the Krusty Krab, mostly because the people already know he will get sick from eating it. He eats the spoiled moldy patty, and he is promptly rushed to the hospital minutes later while now green. As he is being wheeled in, Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to wrap up the rest of the patty because he still thinks it is worth eating, while the latter worries over his boss. Soon in the hospital, the Flying Dutchman appears to condemn him in Davy Jones' locker, the series equivalent of the underworld, for his cheap actions. Mr. Krabs falsely claims his name is Harold Flower, but the Dutchman gets confirmation from the nurse that he is lying. When they arrive at Davy Jones' locker, Mr. Krabs begs to be freed. The Dutchman agrees to do this, as long as he will always be generous from then on, and Mr. Krabs promises. At the Krusty Krab, which went bankrupt and ended up going out of business due to the amount of business lost in Krabs' absence, Squidward is going through his boss's belongings while a tearful SpongeBob believes he will come back, though his coworker is not convinced by the doctor's word. At that moment, Mr. Krabs returns to the Krusty Krab and his employees are shocked to see him again. SpongeBob celebrates as Squidward is deadpan, but Mr. Krabs promises to be less cheap and more generous. Reopening his restaurant, Mr. Krabs begins to treat everyone nicer with the employee lounge and free refills. But soon, SpongeBob and Squidward become concerned when Mr. Krabs is not the least bit fazed when he receives a $10,000 credit card bill and does not have any money in the cash register to pay for it. When they tell Mr. Krabs how weird he has been acting, he states that he is having a nightmare and that there is nothing to worry about, much to their shock and confusion. After Squidward and SpongeBob tell him otherwise of getting out of the hospital, he realizes that the whole thing was real and starts to read the hospital bill and started to scream while his head breaks and grows 2 times in a row. He now becomes a cheapskate once again and revokes all the free things he gave to the customers. From their soda refills to their toys, rewinding the TV to erase someone's memory, and threatening to rip off one lucky customer's arm over a penny so that his luck runs out. The Dutchman then returns to take him back to the locker for eternity, but SpongeBob sticks up for his boss and bets that Mr. Krabs is generous, and he would pick him over all the money in the Dutchman's pocket. The Dutchman takes up the deal and offers Mr. Krabs the choice between SpongeBob and the money he has in his pocket, 62 cents. Mr. Krabs promptly takes the money, sending a heartbroken SpongeBob to Davy Jones' locker. Squidward is shocked and outraged at Mr. Krabs for selling SpongeBob's soul for 62 cents, and chews him out for selling him out despite the fact he stuck up for him, and that he should be ashamed of himself. Mr. Krabs sees the error of his ways and rejects the filthy money, because he learns a lesson of what it's like to run the Krusty Krab without SpongeBob. Without his best fry cook, he will never make any more money, and he begs for SpongeBob back. The Flying Dutchman then comes back with SpongeBob, not because of Mr. Krabs repenting, but because SpongeBob was too annoying due to his talkative behavior, and he believes that not letting Mr. Krabs have SpongeBob in his life would be a fate worse than death. Mr. Krabs apologizes to SpongeBob for his petty act, but the latter dismisses it as he would do the same, but promptly denies it, and the crew laughs as the episode ends. At the end of the episode is a post-credit scene. The Flying Dutchman is seen reading near the locker when the phone rings. The caller is revealed to be SpongeBob, who continues to brag the Flying Dutchman again with his consistent chatting. Next, I'm going to talk about I Had an Accident. Enjoy. The episode begins at the Sand Mountain with Patrick sandboarding, as he crashes into a hill, breaking into pieces. It turns out that Patrick is playing a video game of sandboarding while complaining that his game stinks. But as a distraction, the same thing that happened to the character in the game soon happens to him in reality. Sandy warns SpongeBob not to play games and board while always paying attention to the mountain, then SpongeBob begins to board. While sandboarding, SpongeBob tells Patrick not to eat sand and does a stunt called the Grouchy Squidward, with the real Squidward telling SpongeBob not to make moves based around him. While doing this stunt, he almost crashes into a land tree. He then turns around to tell Sandy that everything is fine, but he then loses control of the board and is sent flying. He then begins to plummet to the ground, and Sandy tells him to land on his bottom. SpongeBob does so, but his bottom shatters into many pieces and he is rushed to the hospital. The purple Dr. Fish says that it took 20 hours to glue it back together and that if he has another similar injury, he may end up in the Iron Butt, which is a huge machine on wheels connected to where the butt used to be. SpongeBob goes on, around-the-clock butt patrol. However, it seems the entire outside world is out to break his butt, as he passes a football pitch where players are slapped on the butt and a spanking machine. Eventually, SpongeBob cannot take it anymore and decides to stay in his home forever. Sandy and Patrick show up later to ask SpongeBob if he wants to go shuffleboarding again, but they find him sitting on the floor and he tells them that he will never go outside again. Sandy then asks SpongeBob if he will be lonely and how he would keep his job at the Krusty Krab, and he reveals the only friends he has now are Chip, a potato chip, Penny, an actual penny, and used napkin, a napkin that was used recently, and will be doing his job using an incredibly long spatula. Sandy then says that they will find an activity that is so fun, he will have to go outside. They try a cake that SpongeBob must leave the house to blow out the candles on, jellyfishing, ice creams, trampolines, and even giving an old person a bath, but nothing works. SpongeBob then sings a song about the joys of staying indoors, which makes Sandy very frustrated. Sandy comes up with a plan to have Patrick put on a gorilla suit that he wore for Halloween and pretend to attack her so that SpongeBob will have to come out and save her. SpongeBob is unconvinced by this and knows it is Patrick, until what appears to be another Patrick star eating ice cream appears on the scene and questions Sandy to everyone's shock. Sandy questions the second Patrick on him not being in costume, but Patrick reveals that he is in the costume. Sandy asks if he is the real Patrick, then who the other Patrick is. The second Patrick pulls down a zipper, revealing him to be an actual live-action gorilla. He then stuffs the screaming Sandy and Patrick into a bag, attacks them, and beats them up. SpongeBob is horrified by the display, and initially tells his friends he warned them of the danger and does not want to risk going outside to save them, but Chip reminds him that if it was him being attacked by a gorilla, Sandy and Patrick would try to save him. Convinced by this, SpongeBob finally leaves the safety of his home to save his friends, but the gorilla grabs him and splits him in half. Admitting that them being attacked by a gorilla was all his fault, SpongeBob apologizes to his friends for being stubborn on coming outside and admits he is over it, although he also admits to now being terrified of gorillas, which is known as pithecophobia. They forgive him and say that they are also terrified of gorillas as well. When SpongeBob's first half asks his second half, what's a gorilla doing underwater in the first place? The gorilla, who reveals that he can talk, tries to explain before calling his friend George the horse, and he rides on him to flee the scene as SpongeBob's two halves, Sandy and Patrick, watch him and George ride away into the sunset. After they watch the horse and the gorilla run off, a live-action family, who stares at each other in confusion, turns off the TV to end the episode. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos. Goodbye everyone.